Europe in the year 1347 was alive with opportunity. Bustling marketplaces echoed with the voices of merchants from distant lands. Merchant ships crossed the Mediterranean carrying silk from Asia, spices from India, gold from Africa, and treasures from the East. Magnificent cathedrals rose toward the heavens. Castles overlooked fertile fields. Growing cities promised prosperity unlike anything seen before. To many, the future seemed bright. No one knew that hidden within this thriving network of trade was an invisible passenger, a silent killer, one that would soon bring kingdoms to their knees, empty entire cities, and change the course of human history forever. Within only a few years, millions would be dead. The world they knew was about to disappear. In October of 1347, several merchant ships sailed into the Sicilian port of Messina. At first, they appeared no different from countless vessels that had arrived before. But something was terribly wrong. Many sailors were already dead. Others stumbled weakly onto the docks, burning with fever. Their bodies were covered in dark swellings that had appeared almost overnight. Some coughed blood. Others collapsed where they stood. The city's people watched in horror. Authorities quickly ordered the ships to leave, but it was already too late. Death had already stepped ashore, invisible to every eye, silent, patient, unstoppable. The people of the Middle Ages had no idea what they were facing. They blamed poisoned air. They blamed strange alignments of the planets. Some believed it was divine punishment, but the true culprit was far smaller than anyone could imagine. A bacterium known today as Yersinia pestis. It traveled inside fleas that commonly fed on rodents. As trade routes expanded across Asia, the Middle East, and Europe, rats unknowingly accompanied merchant ships, carrying infected fleas into crowded ports and cities. Once the bacterium reached people, it spread with devastating efficiency. No one could see it, no one understood it, and no one knew how to stop it. Within days, fear spread faster than facts. Families locked themselves inside their homes. Merchants abandoned their shops. Church bells rang almost without pause. Rumors multiplied. Some claimed the disease traveled through the air. Others whispered that outsiders had poisoned wells. No explanation seemed impossible. The unknown was often more terrifying than the disease itself. As each sunrise revealed more bodies than the day before, one truth became impossible to ignore. This was no ordinary illness. Europe had entered one of the darkest chapters in human history, and the worst was still to come. From a single port, the plague began its relentless march, along trade routes, across rivers, through villages, into castles, and eventually into nearly every corner of Europe. Entire communities would vanish. Ancient traditions would collapse. The balance of power would shift forever. Within just a few years, the Black Death would claim an estimated 25 to 50 million lives in Europe alone, with many more deaths across Asia, North Africa, and the Middle East. Humanity had never witnessed devastation on such a scale. The plague had arrived, and there was nowhere left to hide. How could a disease carried by a tiny bacterium bring mighty kingdoms to their knees? In the next chapter, we'll uncover the extraordinary journey of the invisible killer from the vast steppes of Central Asia to the crowded streets of medieval Europe, and reveal how trade, rats, and fleas unknowingly fueled one of history's deadliest pandemics. Long before Europe knew fear, before church bells rang for the dead, before entire kingdoms collapsed, the world's deadliest killer was already traveling. Its journey began thousands of kilometers away, across the endless grasslands of Central Asia. Here, traders, nomads, soldiers, and merchants crossed one another every day, but among them traveled an unseen passenger, a microscopic bacterium that no one knew existed. The true culprit wasn't the rat. It wasn't even visible to the naked eye. Hidden inside tiny fleas lived a bacterium called Yersinia pestis. These fleas fed on infected wild rodents such as marmots. When one animal died, the starving fleas searched desperately for another host. Eventually, that host became humans. 4 centuries. The Silk Road connected East and West. Precious silk, gold, spices, and ideas flowed across continents. But commerce was unknowingly carrying something far more valuable. Death itself. Every caravan became another step in the plague's silent march. Food supplies attracted rodents. Rodents carried fleas. Fleas carried plague. Merchants never noticed. They worried about robbers, harsh weather, and lack of water. The greatest danger was already inside their wagons. The Mongol Empire united land stretching from China to Eastern Europe. Never before had so many people, animals, and goods traveled such enormous distances. Roads became safer. Trade flourished. Ironically, the same network that connected civilizations became the perfect highway for a pandemic. In 1346, the bustling trading city of Kaffa stood on the Black Sea. It was one of Europe's richest commercial ports. Merchants from every corner of the known world gathered here. None imagined the city was about to become one of history's most infamous battlegrounds. During the siege, disease erupted among the Mongol army. Soldiers died in horrifying numbers. According to several historical accounts, their commanders ordered infected corpses to be hurled over Kaffa's walls. Whether this act alone spread the plague remains debated by historians. But panic inside the city became impossible to contain. Desperate merchants fled by ship. They believed they were escaping death. Instead, they carried it with them. Hidden below deck, rats nested among grain barrels. Fleas waited patiently. Every harbor became another destination for the invisible enemy. One ship became 10. 10 became hundreds. Within months, the plague crossed the Mediterranean. Sicily, Constantinople, Alexandria, Marseille. The infection was no longer a regional disaster. It had become an international catastrophe. Across Europe, life continued as usual. Farmers harvested crops. Children laughed in village streets. Churches filled with worshippers. No one knew that somewhere beyond the horizon, ships carrying death were already approaching. Humanity was only weeks away from witnessing one of history's greatest catastrophes. The ships have arrived. What follows will transform bustling cities into silent graveyards and ordinary families into witnesses of unimaginable horror. In the next chapter, we'll follow the plague's first terrifying footsteps through Europe and discover how fear spread even faster than the disease itself. The bustling Sicilian port of Messina awakens like any other morning. Fishermen prepare their nets. Merchants haggle over spices and silk. Dock workers wait for the next fleet of trading ships. Then, on the horizon, 12 Genoa ships appear. They should have brought wealth. Instead, they carried death. As the ships drift closer, something feels wrong. There are no cheers from the crew, no sailors climbing the rigging, no captain shouting commands. Curious dock workers board the vessels. What they discover is beyond imagination. Corpses lie scattered across the decks. Others are barely alive, burning with fever, their skin covered in strange black swellings. Many can no longer speak. Compassion overcomes fear. The sick are carried ashore. Families offer water. Priests pray over the dying. Doctors attempt treatments they barely understand. Nobody realizes every act of kindness is bringing the plague deeper into the city, while the people focus on the dying sailors. Another invasion is already underway. Rats race through warehouses. Fleas leap from animal to animal, then to humans. No armies march through the gates. No warning bells ring. The enemy is microscopic, silent, invisible. At first, the illness resembles an ordinary fever. Then everything changes. Victims develop painful swellings, some as large as apples. They appear beneath the arms, around the neck, and in the groin. These swollen lymph nodes become known as buboes. Within hours, the fever grows unbearable. Medieval medicine has no answer. Some doctors drain blood. Others prescribe herbs. Many burn incense, believing foul air is responsible. Some advise carrying flowers beneath the nose. Every remedy fails. The disease ignores every treatment. Death continues its relentless advance. Within days, fear overwhelms reason. Families abandon their homes. Wealthy merchants flee into the countryside. Some refuse to care for sick relatives. Others lock themselves inside their houses. But the plague follows wherever people go. Every escape spreads the infection farther. Churches overflow with desperate worshippers. Many believe the plague is God's punishment. Priests hear endless confessions. Bells ring throughout the day, not for celebration, but for funerals. Soon, even the priests begin to die. From Messina, merchant ships sail onward. Genoa, Venice, Marseille, Barcelona. Every major port receives more than cargo. They receive the plague. Trade, the engine of medieval prosperity, has become the engine of catastrophe. By the end of 1347, Europe has crossed a point of no return. The disease can no longer be contained. Every road, every river, every marketplace becomes another pathway for death. The continent does not yet know it, but over the next few years, tens of millions of lives will disappear. Civilization itself is about to be tested. The marketplace once echoed with laughter. Merchants shouted their prices. Children chased one another through narrow streets. But now, silence has replaced the sounds of life. Doors remain shut. Shops stand abandoned. Smoke no longer rises from many chimneys. Entire neighborhoods have vanished into an eerie stillness. It feels as though time itself has stopped. The plague spreads faster than anyone can count. Every sunrise reveals more bodies. Every sunset brings new funerals. Soon, there are too many dead to bury. Cemetery walls can no longer contain them. The living struggle simply to keep pace with death. Individual funerals become impossible. Large trenches are dug beyond the city walls. Bodies are laid side by side, then covered with earth. Families often never learn where their loved ones rest. Names disappear. Memories fade. Only the plague continues. Physicians work day and night. They bleed patients. They prescribe herbs. They burn aromatic woods to cleanse the air. Some cover their faces with cloth soaked in vinegar. Others refuse to treat the sick at all. The true cause remains invisible. Without understanding bacteria, every cure becomes another desperate guess. Fear changes people. Parents become separated from children. Husbands leave wives. Neighbors avoid one another. A simple touch, a shared meal, even a final embrace, could mean death. Love itself becomes overshadowed by survival. Across Europe, churches overflow. People kneel for hours. They beg for mercy. Many believe the plague is divine punishment. Others wonder, why would innocent children suffer? Questions echo through every cathedral. Yet answers remain painfully out of reach. When people cannot explain disaster, they often search for someone to blame. Rumors spread faster than facts. Fear fuels suspicion. Communities begin turning against outsiders and minorities. Many innocent people are falsely accused of causing the plague. History would later remember these persecutions as another tragic consequence of the pandemic. In times of crisis, fear can become as destructive as disease itself. Fields remain unharvested. Livestock wander unattended. Mills stop turning. Markets collapse. Entire villages disappear from maps. With so many workers gone, the economy begins to crumble. Europe faces not only a health disaster, but a social and economic collapse. Between 1347 and 1351, the plague sweeps relentlessly across Europe. Historians estimate that between one-third and one-half of the continent's population may have died during this period. Some cities lose far more than others. No kingdom is untouched. No social class is spared. Kings, peasants, merchants, priests. The Black Death shows no preference. Eventually, the wave of death begins to slow, not because humanity has defeated the plague, but because it has already taken an unimaginable toll. Europe survives, scarred, changed, forever different from the world that existed only a few years before. Yet the greatest transformation is only just beginning. The screams had faded. The church bells had fallen silent. Across Europe, the plague had finally begun to disappear. But what remained was a continent almost unrecognizable. Entire villages stood empty. Fields that once fed kingdoms had become seas of weeds. Wind drifted through abandoned homes where no family would ever return. By the early 1350s, historians estimate that between one-third and one-half of Europe's population had vanished. The Black Death had not merely killed people. It had erased entire communities. For the first time in generations, workers were suddenly more valuable than kings expected. There simply weren't enough people left to harvest crops, build houses, or work the land. Peasants who had once been trapped in poverty discovered something extraordinary. Their labor had become priceless. Many demanded higher wages. Some simply walked away from cruel landlords. For centuries, ordinary people had possessed almost no bargaining power. The plague changed that overnight. Europe's feudal system had ruled society for hundreds of years. Kings, nobles, lords, peasants, everyone knew their place. Until the plague. Landowners desperately tried to force workers back into old contracts. Many governments even passed laws freezing wages. But reality refused to obey. When workers were scarce, freedom became possible. Historians believe the Black Death accelerated the slow collapse of medieval feudalism, permanently shifting power toward labors and towns. Life slowly returned. Markets reopened. Children were born. Merchants resumed their journeys. Ships once again crossed the Mediterranean. Cities that had nearly disappeared slowly filled with new life. But nothing was the same. Government began recording deaths. Some cities improved sanitation. Others introduced quarantine measures for arriving ships. Humanity had learned, painfully, that disease could reshape civilization. The plague exposed an uncomfortable truth. Much of medieval medicine had failed. Doctors relying on ancient beliefs could not stop the catastrophe. Slowly, curiosity replaced certainty. Universities expanded medical studies. Observation became more important than tradition. Centuries later, these early changes would contribute to the scientific revolution that transformed medicine forever. Millions had prayed. Millions had died. Many survivors questioned everything they had believed. Some became even more devoted. Others lost faith completely. The authority of religious institutions weakened in many regions. A quiet change had begun, one that would echo through the centuries. The Black Death was more than a pandemic. It became one of history's greatest turning points. It reshaped economies, changed governments, redefined labor, accelerated scientific thinking, and transformed Europe forever. The invisible bacterium had rewritten civilization. But one mystery still remains. How do scientists know, with such confidence, that a tiny bacterium caused a Black Death nearly 700 years ago? No microscopes existed, no DNA tests, no laboratories. So how was the culprit finally discovered? For more than 600 years, no one truly knew what caused the Black Death. People blamed poisoned wells. Others blamed bad air. Some believed the planets had aligned in anger. Many thought it was divine punishment. But none of these explanations could account for how the disease spread with terrifying speed. The greatest pandemic in medieval history remained one of humanity's biggest unsolved mysteries, until science finally caught up with history. The investigation began not in a hospital, but in libraries. Historians gathered thousands of medieval letters, tax records, monastery journals, and eyewitness accounts. Every document became a clue. They compared dates, routes, symptoms, deaths. Slowly, a pattern emerged. The disease appeared to move along major trade routes, following merchants, ships, and caravans across continents. The killer wasn't random. It was traveling. Then came an extraordinary discovery. Across Europe, archaeologists uncovered mass graves dating to the mid-1300s. Entire families had been buried together. Some graves contained hundreds of victims. The bones revealed no obvious cause of death. But scientists knew that teeth often preserved traces of ancient blood-borne infections. If the plague had left any evidence behind, it might still be hidden inside those teeth. Modern laboratories did something medieval doctors could never have imagined. Researchers carefully extracted microscopic fragments of ancient DNA from plague victims' teeth. The process required extraordinary precision. Even the smallest contamination could ruin the results. Years of work finally paid off. Inside the centuries-old remains, scientists found genetic material belonging to a single bacterium. The DNA matched a bacterium known today as Yersinia pestis, the very same bacterium still responsible for plague outbreaks in parts of the world. After centuries of speculation, the mystery was solved. The Black Death had not been caused by cursed aeroplanetary alignments. It had been caused by an invisible microorganism, one so small that no one alive in the Middle Ages could possibly have seen it. But the bacterium couldn't travel alone. It relied on an unexpected partner, the flea. Fleas feeding on infected rodents became carriers of Yersinia pestis. When their rodent hosts died, they searched for new victims. Humans. Merchant ships carrying grain also carried rats. And hidden among the rats were infected fleas. Trade had unknowingly become the perfect delivery system for one of history's deadliest diseases. By combining archaeology, genetics, climate records, and medieval documents, scientists reconstructed the pandemic almost day by day. The evidence pointed toward a perfect storm. Global trade, crowded cities, rodents, fleas, and a bacterium perfectly adapted to exploit them all. What once seemed like chaos now made scientific sense. The Black Death is no longer just a story from history. It is a warning. Modern science has transformed our ability to detect dangerous diseases. DNA sequencing, global surveillance, vaccines, antibiotics, rapid communication. These tools give humanity advantages our ancestors never possessed. Yet one lesson remains unchanged. Disease respects no borders. Preparation, not panic, is our greatest defense. Statistics tell us how many died. Science tells us why. But numbers alone cannot capture the terror of living through the Black Death. What did survivors see? What did they write? How did ordinary people describe the end of their world? History is often told through numbers. 25 million dead, 50 million dead, 1/3 of Europe gone. But numbers cannot cry. They cannot fear. They cannot mourn. To truly understand the Black Death, we must listen to those who lived through it. Their words have survived for nearly 7 centuries, and through them, the dead still speak. In Italy, a notary recorded scenes almost beyond imagination. He described fathers abandoning sons, mothers leaving daughters, neighbors refusing to help one another. Fear had become stronger than love. Every knock on the door could mean death. Families that had lived together for generations disappeared within days. The plague wasn't only destroying bodies, it was tearing apart the bonds that held society together. One of history's most heartbreaking testimonies came from Agnolo di Cura of Siena. He wrote that he buried his own children with his own hands. There were no priests, no funeral processions, no grieving crowds, only silence and endless graves. His account reminds us, behind every statistic was a family, behind every number, a name. Travelers entering once busy cities found streets without voices. Market stalls stood untouched. Churches echoed with emptiness. Doors remained open. Meals sat unfinished. Some homes contained entire families who had died where they slept. The cities themselves seemed haunted, not by ghosts, but by absence. Physicians documented symptoms with desperate precision. Painful swellings, burning fevers, dark patches beneath the skin. They tried herbs, bloodletting, prayer, incense. Nothing stopped the disease. Many doctors stayed, knowing they would likely become patients themselves. Some died beside those they had tried to save. Some children awoke to find every member of their family gone. Some wandered alone between villages. Others were taken in by strangers. An entire generation grew up carrying memories no child should ever possess. They became the builders of a new Europe, but they never forgot what they had witnessed. Long after the epidemic ended, the memories remained. Communities built chapels. Families preserved stories. Artists painted scenes of death and survival. For centuries, the Black Death lived not only in history books, but in songs, legends, prayers, and whispered family memories. The pandemic became part of Europe's collective memory. The people of the 14th century had no microscopes, no antibiotics, no vaccines. Yet they understood something timeless, that humanity is connected. One traveler, one ship, one infected flea could change history forever. Their voices remind us that behind every outbreak are real people, real families, and real courage. History does not only preserve the past, it prepares us for the future. The Black Death did not mark the end of humanity's battle with disease. It was only the beginning. In the centuries that followed, new pandemics would emerge. Smallpox, cholera, influenza, and, in our own time, COVID-19. The Black Death ended, but its legacy never did. The plague disappeared from many parts of Europe, yet its fingerprints remained in governments, in medicine, in science, in economics, and even in the cities we live in today. The greatest lesson of the Black Death wasn't simply how millions died. It was how humanity changed afterward. Before the plague, most governments had no organized system to stop infectious diseases. After witnessing entire cities collapse, that changed. Venice pioneered one of history's first organized quarantine systems. Ships arriving from infected regions were required to wait for 40 days before passengers could enter the city. The Italian word quaranta, meaning 40, would eventually give the world a new word, quarantine. For the first time, disease prevention became a responsibility of the state. The plague exposed a dangerous truth. Overcrowded cities allowed disease to spread with terrifying speed. Gradually, communities improved sanitation. Waste disposal became more organized. Fresh water systems expanded. Some streets were widened. Markets became better regulated. These improvements were modest by modern standards, but they marked the beginning of urban public health. For centuries, illness had often been explained through superstition. The Black Death challenged those beliefs. People began asking new questions. Could disease have natural causes? Could observation reveal the truth? These questions helped lay the foundation for scientific medicine. Generations later, they would inspire discoveries in microbiology, vaccination, and germ theory. Many believe the plague belongs only to history. It doesn't. Yersinia pestis still exists today. It survives in wild rodent populations across parts of Asia, Africa, the Americas, and elsewhere. Each year, a small number of human cases are still reported. Fortunately, modern antibiotics can successfully treat most infections when diagnosed early. The invisible killer still exists. But today, humanity understands its enemy. The Black Death spread through medieval trade routes. Today's world is even more connected. A traveler can cross continents in hours. Goods move between nations every minute. Globalization has brought enormous benefits, but it also allows diseases to travel faster than ever before. The challenge remains the same. Stay connected, without allowing infections to outrun our defenses. When COVID-19 swept across the world, history seemed strangely familiar. Masks, quarantines, travel restrictions, fear, hope, scientific collaboration. Although separated by nearly 7 centuries, both pandemics reminded humanity of the same truth. Viruses and bacteria do not recognize borders. Our greatest strength has always been cooperation. The Black Death was one of history's darkest chapters. Yet from unimaginable suffering, humanity learned. Medicine advanced. Science evolved. Public health was born. International cooperation became essential. The plague changed civilization forever, not because it destroyed the world, but because it forced the world to become wiser. Millions of people whose names have been lost to history changed the future without ever knowing it. Their suffering transformed medicine. Their tragedy reshaped nations. Their legacy protects lives even today. The Black Death is more than a story about disease. It is a story about resilience, about discovery, about survival, and above all, it is a reminder that humanity's greatest victories often emerge from its darkest moments. In memory of the millions who lost their lives to the Black Death, and to all those who have fought pandemics throughout history, may knowledge, compassion, and cooperation continue to guide humanity into the future. Kindly subscribe now and share with that special person who loves knowledge, because our next documentary will thrill you.